I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it honestly before you answer. Have you ever started investing, actually done it, put real money in, and then felt absolutely nothing? Checked your account a few months later, saw a number that barely moved, and thought, why am I even doing this? If you have, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not wrong for feeling that way. That feeling is one of the most predictable things that happens to new investors. It doesn't mean you're impatient. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. It means you're human, and your brain is reacting perfectly rationally to an experience that was never designed to feel rewarding in the short term. Today, I want to show you exactly what's going on. The psychology, the math, the transition that eventually happens, and why the investors who simply stay in the game tend to end up somewhere that feels almost unreal compared to where they started. No hype, no promises, no shortcuts. Just a clear and honest look at how this actually works. Let me describe your experience back to you. You open a brokerage account. You put in a few $100s a month, maybe $300, maybe $500. You're proud of yourself. You've done the responsible thing. You've heard about compound interest your whole life, and now you're finally doing it. 6 months go by. You check the balance. It's gone up maybe by a couple $100. You could have made that in a weekend of overtime. You start to feel a vague, creeping suspicion that the whole concept of compounding is something people invented to make ordinary savings accounts sound exciting. Then a year passes. Maybe a little more. You've put in a few $1,000s. The growth feels proportional to nothing. The math isn't clicking. You wonder if you're doing something wrong, the wrong fund, the wrong platform, the wrong strategy. Here's what's happening. Your brain is wired for linear thinking. If you plant 10 seeds, you expect roughly 10 plants. If you work 10 hours, you expect 10 hours worth of pay. We are built through thousands of years of daily experience to expect the world to scale in straight lines. Compound growth does not scale in a straight line. It scales in a curve, and in the early stages, that curve looks almost flat. The steepness comes later, and it comes fast. But our brains, pattern-matching machines that they are, look at the first few years, see a flat line, and conclude that nothing meaningful is happening. Something meaningful is happening. It's just invisible. Think of it like this. Imagine you're building a bonfire. For the first 10 minutes, you're on your knees, blowing on a tiny spark, nursing a flame that keeps threatening to go out. Nothing about that moment feels powerful, but the fire is real. The heat is building in the wood around it. And when it finally catches, it doesn't just get a little bigger. It roars. That's compounding. The early years are the spark. The later years are the roar. Let's talk about the actual math, because I think most people have heard the phrase, your money grows exponentially, so many times that it's lost all meaning. I want to restore the meaning. Exponential growth simply means this. The bigger the number gets, the faster it grows, because growth is always calculated as a percentage of the current total. Here's a clean example. You invest $500 per month into a broad index fund. Over the long run, the U.S. stock market, specifically the S&P 500, has returned roughly 9 to 10% per year on average, before inflation, going back nearly a century. It doesn't return that every single year. Some years it returns 25%. Some years it drops 30%. but across long stretches of time, the average has been remarkably consistent. Let's use 9.5% as our working number. Conservative, realistic, honest. At the end of year 1, you've contributed $6,000. Your returns are maybe a few $100s. You have perhaps $6,300. The return barely registers. At the end of year 5, you've contributed $30,000. Your portfolio is worth roughly $37,000. The returns, about $7,000, feel meaningful but still modest. About 19% of your portfolio came from growth. At the end of year 10, you've contributed $60,000. Your portfolio is worth around $95,000. Now the returns, about $35,000, are getting serious. More than a third of your wealth came from the market, not from your own money. At the end of year 20, you've contributed $120,000. Your portfolio is worth approximately $330,000. Two-thirds of that, more than $200,000, came from growth, not from your deposits. Your money has more than doubled itself on top of everything you put in. At the end of year 30, you've contributed $180,000. Your portfolio is worth somewhere in the range of $920,000 to $1 million. You are a millionaire, and more than $700,000 of that million, nearly 80%, came not from your contributions, but from returns, building on returns, building on returns. That is not a trick. That is not a special strategy. That is arithmetic applied consistently over time. But here is the critical thing to understand about those numbers. The growth in year 28 is not the same as the growth in year 2. In year 2, 9.5% of a small number is a small number. In year 28, 9.5% of a large number is a life-changing amount of money. At a portfolio value of $800,000, a single year of average returns adds roughly $76,000. That is more than many people earn in a full year of work, generated automatically while you sleep. The curve isn't steep at the beginning. It's almost flat. But it doesn't stay flat. There is a specific moment in every long-term investor's journey that I want to draw your attention to. It's the moment when your annual investment returns become larger than your annual contributions. For our example, $500 per month, 9.5% average returns. That crossover happens somewhere around year 13 to 15. Before that point, your own deposits are the primary engine of portfolio growth. After that point, the market itself becomes the primary engine. And once the market takes over as the primary driver, the math starts doing things that genuinely feel surreal. Think about what it means for your portfolio to hit $400,000. At that level, an average year in the market generates roughly $38,000 in returns. You're contributing $6,000 per year. The market is contributing 6 times more than you are. You have, in a sense, hired a version of yourself that never sleeps, never takes a vacation, and works every single day. And that version of you now earns far more than the real you puts in. This is the transition that most people who quit early never get to experience. They leave the game in year 4 or year 7, frustrated, skeptical, convinced it isn't working, and they walk away from a process that was right on the edge of doing something remarkable. They leave during the flat part of the curve, never knowing the steep part was coming. I want to tell you about two people. They're composites, not real individuals, but the math is real, and the emotional journey is real. The first is a woman named Dara. She starts investing at 25. She puts in $400 a month into a simple index fund and leaves it alone. For the first few years, she barely checks the account. She doesn't try to time the market. When the market drops in year 3, she keeps contributing. When it drops again in year 8, she keeps contributing. She never tries to get clever. She just stays in. The second is a man named Marcus. He also starts at 25, also puts in $400 a month. But Marcus watches his account closely. By year 5, he's frustrated. He's put in $24,000, and his account shows $28,000. A $4,000 gain over 5 years. That feels laughable to him. He starts thinking he'd be better off in real estate, or that he's picking the wrong investments. At age 31, after 6 years, he pauses his contributions. He plans to come back to it. He doesn't come back until he's 41. Now they're both 65. Let's look at what happened. Dara, 40 years of consistent $400 per month contributions. Portfolio value, approximately $2.4 million. Marcus, 6 years of contributions, a 10-year gap, then 14 more years starting at 41. Total contributed over his lifetime, roughly the same amount as Dara. Portfolio value at 65, approximately $680,000. The difference between them is not income, it's not intelligence, it's not even the amount they invested. The difference is that Dara stayed in during the years that felt pointless, the years when the curve was flat, and Marcus didn't. Marcus lost not just the decade he was out of the market. He lost all the compounding that would have grown on top of that decade. He lost the steep part of the curve. He lost the years when the market was doing most of the heavy lifting. $400 a month. The same amount. A nearly $1.7 million difference. That is not a hypothetical designed to scare you. That is arithmetic. And the only thing standing between those two outcomes is the decision to keep going when nothing feels like it's happening. Let me give you the practical side of this, because staying consistent is easier when you understand the tools, the risks, and the realities. On index funds, the simplest and most battle-tested vehicle for long-term compounding is a broad, low-cost index fund, something that tracks the entire U.S. stock market or the S&P 500. These funds don't try to beat the market. They just own the market. And decades of evidence show that simply owning the market consistently beats the vast majority of actively managed strategies over long time horizons. You don't need to pick stocks. You don't need a sophisticated strategy. A total market index fund and monthly contributions is genuinely all most people need. On volatility, the market will drop. Not might, will. At some point in your investing life, you will watch your portfolio fall 20, 30, maybe 40% in a short period of time. This is not a malfunction. It is a feature of how markets work, and it is the primary reason long-term returns are as high as they are. Volatility is the price of admission. The people who earn long-run returns are the people who don't sell when the market falls. When the market drops, you are not losing wealth permanently. You are experiencing a temporary paper decline in an asset that has, historically, always recovered and gone on to new highs. The dangerous response to a falling market is to sell. The correct response is to keep contributing and, if anything, remind yourself that you are now buying more shares at lower prices. On inflation. This is the one risk that's easy to underestimate. If inflation runs at 3% annually, a reasonable long-run assumption, then $1 million in 30 years has the purchasing power of roughly $400,000 today. That's significant. It doesn't mean compounding isn't worth doing. It means you should account for inflation when setting your goals. If you want the equivalent of $1 million in today's money 30 years from now, you need to be building towards significantly more than $1 million nominal dollars. Factor inflation into your targets, not your discouragement. On taxes, where you hold your investments matters. A tax-advantaged account, like a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA, or a 401k, allows your money to grow without being eroded by capital gains taxes each year. In a taxable brokerage account, taxes drag on returns in ways that compound over time in the wrong direction. The general priority for most people: max out your employer 401k match first, that's free money, then contribute to a Roth IRA if you're eligible, then go back to the 401k, then use a taxable account for anything beyond that. The specific right answer depends on your situation, but the principle is consistent. Keep as much of your growth inside tax-advantaged wrappers as you can. On staying consistent, automate everything you possibly can. Set up automatic monthly transfers from your checking account to your investment account. Remove the decision from your daily life. The biggest enemy of long-term investing is not market volatility. It's friction. It's the month you forget to transfer. It's the month you decide you'll do it next month. Automation turns an active, effortful choice into a passive default. And passive defaults maintained over decades are where wealth comes from. I want to leave you with a reframe, not a motivational speech, just a different way of thinking about time and money that I think is genuinely useful. Most of us think about investing in terms of what we're giving up right now. The $400 a month that could have been a nicer apartment, a better car, a few extra dinners out. We feel the sacrifice in the present. We can touch it, feel the absence of it. The future gain is abstract, invisible, theoretical. But here is what's actually true. The $400 you invest today, at age 25, at age 30, at age 35, is not just $400. It is every dollar that $400 will ever become. Every gain that compounds on top of it, and every gain that compounds on top of those gains. In a real sense, the $400 you invest today at 30 might be worth $15,000 or $20,000 by the time you're 65. You are not sacrificing $400. You are choosing between $400 now and a far larger amount later. The flat part of the curve feels like failure. It isn't. It's the foundation. Every year you spend in the flat part is a year of groundwork that the steep part will be built on. The people who end up with extraordinary outcomes are not, in most cases, people who found a brilliant strategy or got lucky with a stock or timed the market perfectly. They are people who started early, stayed consistent, and refused to let the slow early years convince them it wasn't working. Compounding doesn't reward brilliance. It doesn't care how sophisticated you are. It rewards patience. It rewards showing up. It rewards the simple decision to keep going when nothing looks like it's happening. You already know how to do that.